I've won 3 elections, so it does. But we did great in the second one. It was a rigged deal. That's all they're good at, weaponization and cheating on elections. They turn the cameras off when I talk about it because they don't want good stuff for us, because they don't want us to win elections. And why, I don't know.
The dangerous and insidious lie about voter fraud persists as Donald Trump lays the groundwork to challenge the integrity of this year's election results as well. Today, the New York Times has some alarming and exhaustive new reporting on Donald Trump's campaign to tip the scales, rooted in the very same debunked conspiracy theories he's been peddling for years. That includes 19 official actions Trump has taken to question previous results, which began with granting clemency for nearly 1,600 charged insurrectionists while brazenly installing election deniers in the federal government. At least 15 actions to fire, indict, or revoke security clearances for people who have worked against the election denialism movement. 21 actions to tighten voting restrictions designed to tip the scales in his favor. And 14 actions to nationalize elections, many of which have failed in court. But as the New York Times reports, quote, while many of Trump's directives have been blocked or delayed by the courts, election experts say that their potential harm remains significant and that some of the efforts have already eroded faith in the process. Joining me at the table, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy, is here. Importantly, he is also Jack Smith's law partner at Heaphy, Smith, Harbach, and Wyndham. Also joining us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney, now the host of the podcast, Is This Really Legal? Liz Oyer is back with us, and Andrew's with us as well. Let me ask you about the antibodies in the system. I mean, they weren't enough to avoid a deadly insurrection on January 6th, and Trump has stacked the government with election deniers. What are our odds facing all of the things he's doing to mess with our elections?
You still need facts, Nicole, thankfully. Right? If you just keep repeating something, it doesn't make it true. So launching investigations and calling into question the integrity of the election continues to be rhetorical unless there's some actual substance to it, which has not emerged all these years later. It's performative, it's distracting, it is meant to decrease confidence in elections. Hopefully it's not effective because our elections are run really, really well with a lot of security and capable people in this country. My hope is that facts will still matter and that core narrative remains and makes this a fruitless effort.
I'm not as hawkish on facts. Trump ran the government in 2020. And as I was just talking to Andrew about, these were all of his supporters and backers, people who campaigned for him, people who voted for him, people who liked the things he was selling at a policy level, even though that's sort of wild to me. They were his people. They were running the federal government, and they were running more than half the swing states he lost. I guess my question for you is, what do we have to push back with now that is stronger than it was then?
We have the courts, and I think that Tim is right that facts will continue to matter because the courts are insisting on it. The courts are continuing to apply the facts and the law, and they are shooting down Donald Trump's efforts at every turn to interfere with the elections. He has tried to get voter roll data from, I believe, 10 different states, and courts have told him every single time no. There are 2 court decisions that recently said that Donald Trump cannot order the Postal Service not to deliver mail ballots to people in states who aren't complying with the demands for voter data. So the courts are really working overtime to protect our elections. And at the end of the day, the Constitution gives the president 0 role in elections. The Constitution says that states have the primary authority over elections and that the federal government, through Congress, can make certain laws about elections, but those can only be legislated by Congress. The president himself does not, by executive order or any other means of interference, have any power whatsoever with respect to elections.
What does it say, though, that he's sort of chipping around the edges everywhere where he may find an argument to seize some power away?
Well, that's a very important point that you make, Nicole, because it's not about a winning legal strategy.
Right.
It's about sowing doubt. It's because Donald Trump knows that there is a real risk that he will lose, his party will lose at the midterm elections, and he wants to be ready to sow doubt about whether the elections were fair. And he has every intent of doing that. He's laying the groundwork groundwork to do that right now. He's also still relitigating the election that happened in 2020, which is something that I think is becoming very exhausting for the American people. But it is having the effect of sowing doubt and chaos because it's coming from the most powerful elected official in the country.
Thomas Massie just tried to pierce through the insanity with sort of cold, hard reality. And I don't know who was listening, on Earth 2, but he said, what's wrong with the elections? We control everything. We won the White House. We dominate the Supreme Court. We control the House and we control the Senate. The elections are just fine.
Right. And they're not seizing on election machines in Texas or in Wyoming or in states in which the president was victorious. They are targeting areas in which he lost, sometimes surprisingly, like Georgia. He's also, frankly, targeting majority black districts. Like, there's this narrative that it's Detroit and it's Atlanta and it's these cities controlled by black elected officials that somehow are riddled with election fraud. Again, Nicole, without evidence. And to your earlier question, it still takes facts in America, all right, to have a legal consequence. There is still a rule of law. There are still judges, as Liz says, who are going to say no. It's a huge contrast here between elections and immigration, right? Immigration, it's an executive function. The federal government controls that. So he has a huge leeway to do things, really robust executive authority things in the area of immigration. Elections are not a federal function. They're a state function, and that limits his power and gives judges the authority to say, no, you can't seize these voting machines. You can't restrict mail-in ballots. That's a decision for states.
Andrew, where do you come down on the power of the lie to mobilize Donald Trump supporters, as he did for violence on January 6th, and the power of the courts to demand evidence and facts?
So I'm going to give a less rosy assessment than Tim and Liz. I mean, I agree with their points, but I think it ignores something. So it is beyond question that countries like Russia and China, they're not the only two, but certainly they are two countries that interfere in elections, both here in the United States and in other so-called Western democracies. That has happened in the past, and it is going to continue to happen. We have been lucky to have career people at the Department of Justice, at DHS, in the CIA, and in other agencies to thwart those activities. Does anyone think that this administration is going to thwart foreign countries interfering in our elections if they are in favor of Donald Trump? So Russia, which was in favor of Donald Trump in prior elections and is still going to be, do you think this administration is going to do that? And so that's something that's happening before you get to court, which is the government taking actions to make sure that our elections are free and fair and don't have election interference. And that's something that I think is a real threat to democracy and is another lever in addition to the ones that the New York Times has outlined in their terrific article about undermining the upcoming election in the midterms, but also future elections.